Good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to start a new series called I Have the Same Patient Every Time I Come to Work, and he died 2 years ago. Now, as always, there will be new parts to everything published Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, so be sure to tune in for those, all right? Let's go ahead and dive right in. Well, let's just start off with the obvious. I'm not crazy. At least, that's what I like to tell myself. A little background about me. I'm a nurse at a relatively well-known hospital in the beautiful city of Seattle. Initially, I was born and raised in Nevada, but grew tired of being in a desert, so I moved after I graduated. I work the typical shifts for my profession, which is 3 nights on, 4 nights off. The 12-hour shifts can be draining and really demoralizing at times, but I do find a way to get through. I typically wake up around 5:50 p.m. after smashing my snooze button as much as possible, and quickly get dressed and head into work, still wiping the crust from my eyes as I pull into the parking lot. I always look up towards the 4th floor tower before shutting off my car. It's become my work ritual. 4 rooms from the left, and there it is. A brightly lit room that stands out in the darkness of the rest of the floor. He's here. The nerves that used to leave me frozen have now dulled. It has been going on for so long at this point, it would really take something extraordinary to scare me. The walk from my car to the elevator inside is about 5 or so minutes. It's usually during this walk I like to try and plan out how my day is going to be. I like to think about which potential patients I'll be getting today and how I'm going to keep them stable throughout the day. Except for one. Room 407. I never needed to plan ahead for him, simply because I already knew everything that needed to be done. I walk inside and reach the doors of the elevator. These particular doors always took forever to close, even after pressing a specific button to make them go faster. I always try to hop on and close the doors before anyone else can. Look, I'm not much of a people person to begin with, and I know, a person who hates people, yet is a nurse. I get to my floor with very little time to spare almost every day. The less I have to be there, the better for my overall mental health at this point. I find the patient list for the night near my charge nurse's office. No surprise, I have rooms scattered throughout the floor per usual, and at the bottom in bright red numbers, 407. Shit. Is my typical thought every time I read it. It's not that I have a problem with it or anything. It actually makes my day slightly easier. However, there is still a bit of hope when I read the list that I won't have him. You see, I've had this patient for the last 2 years of my career, starting February 26th, 2016. And he died from a massive brain hemorrhage on February 28th, 2016. I get a report from the day shift about my other patients. As much as I try not to, my brain stays focused on room 407 every time we pass it. When it first started happening, I would break out into cold sweats and refuse to approach any room nearby. But I'm over that now, even if I'm a little hesitant. I've gotten pretty efficient with my daily routine to the point of my day mostly being done around 11 p.m. The rest of the night consists of me trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes I help others with their patients. Sometimes I stock the shelves of our storage unit. Anything to keep my mind off the fact that it's nearly almost time. I hear a call light go off in the distance, glancing at my watch and hoping it's any time but the time I already know it is. It's 4:07 a.m. My mind typically tries to convince myself that maybe this time will be different, but I know it won't be. I slowly start walking to the room to answer the call light. As much as I don't want to, it is still my duty and job, regardless of who the patient is. I knock on the door lightly, again still holding the hope that this time will be different. It's not. The door handle creaks and turns by itself, with the door slowly opening inwards into the darkness. I take a deep breath and calmly walk into the room, fully knowing that the door will soon close behind me as soon as I am fully in. Your call light is on. Can I help you? I ask, not to anyone in particular, almost as if to the room itself. I am met with the same response that I always am, a deafening silence that makes me question whether I am still awake or dreaming, having passed out on the ground in fear. As my eyes adjust to the darkness, that same IV pole starts to beep and flash. It's not too loud, and it's not overly bright when it does go off, but it shines just enough light on the bed to confirm what I already know. He's here. I slowly move towards the button to turn off the light, which is sadly placed right above the bed itself. At least I don't have to see his face. It's covered with a thin veil of a white sheet, commonly done to patients post-mortem out of respect. I hold my breath as I move toward him, pretending to walk on eggshells that, if cracked too loudly, would spell my imminent doom. I reach the call light and shut it off. Okay, you should be good, I think to myself as I slowly start backing out, but this time is different. This time, my foot connects with something on the floor, something metallic at one end and plastic at the other. It's enough to let out the pent-up oxygen inside me, forcing me to gasp for the air around me. It reeks of death and suffering and all that lays in between. Oh, dear God, I mouth with no words actually coming out. I come close to slipping, but never have I been this loud before. I pause in my tracks and stare at the shape laying in front of me. After what feels like an eternity of watching for any movement, I manage to slowly start backing towards the door. And here's where I made my biggest mistake yet. I turn to face the door to find the handle, only for a second. As I reached the cool metal of the handle to exit, I looked back to double check one more time. For the first time in 2 years, something different finally happened. He was no longer in his bed. Good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to continue with our previous post of I have the same patient every time I come to work, and he died 2 years ago. Now, if you haven't checked out part 1, go ahead and skip back and check that out as the story does continue. Now, as always, we will be publishing new parts every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, I do have to warn you that some of these stories will have foul language within them. I will do my best to skip around those parts, but sometimes it's unavoidable. All right, let's dive right in. Shit. I can feel my body going cold as ice as I stand there with my fingers glued onto the handle. Where on earth could he have possibly gone? For God's sake, the man was dead. I feel an impending sense of panic welling up inside me, which forces me to quickly open the door and step outside. One of my fellow colleagues just so happened to be walking down the hall and noticed me in my panicked state. "You doing all right in there? You look like you've just seen a ghost," she asks and then laughs. If she only knew. If only they all knew what I have been seeing and what I just saw. I pretend not to notice her and rush to the bathroom situated at the end of the hallway. Once inside, I lock the door and slump to the ground. More questions flooded into my head at an overwhelming pace. Where the hell did he go? Why did he finally move? This exact scenario is something that I initially feared, but over the course of 2 years, turned into something that couldn't possibly happen. I stand back up and go over to the sink, turning the metal faucet on so I can splash my face. As my hand touches the faucet, I am reminded of the familiar feel, similar to the door I just froze in front of. I pause and glance at my watch. It's still 4:07. I hit my wrist, hoping to unjam the mechanisms of the watch, to get it off that cursed number, but no good. I feel as if I'm losing my mind, and I don't want to tell anybody about what's been going on. But enough is enough. I exit the bathroom, hoping to flag down one of the other nurses so that I can see what time they have on their watch. As I step out, my work phone begins to ring. Before unlocking it to answer, I look at the top right corner to see what time it has. 4:07 a.m. I answer the phone, unaware of who it could possibly be. "Fourth floor, how can I help you?" I say, unenthusiastically. "Hello, is this the nurse taking care of the patient in room 407? An unfamiliar voice says. I pause and then say, "Yes." "Great. They've been scheduled for a transfer off your unit. Looks like last shift forgot to do it, so preferably if you could get that done quick, it would be much appreciated." Somewhat stunned, I ask back, "And where is he being transferred to?" I'm then met with the sound of the phone hanging up. I look at my phone again and notice the time has changed to 4:08. Well, that's one problem fixed for the time being. Now I need to figure out where my patient is being transferred to. I quickly move to the nurse's station where all the computers are located, ignoring everyone on my way there. I swipe my badge and open up the chart to room 407. I glance through the notes, all of which ended in 2016, looking for any mention of a transfer. As I continue to look, an alarm goes off asking for assistance in one of the other rooms, causing the nurses all around me to rush down the hall. Normally I would help too, but at this very moment I have a task that I need to attend to. I close out of his chart and reopening it, hoping to refresh the page with some new info. My hand that controls the mouse stops as my eyes zero in on what was previously listed as location room 407. It now says location morgue. Morgue? I didn't even know this hospital had a morgue. I had a sneaking suspicion based off the fact that our employee elevators in the back had a basement floor, but I never thought it was something that was actually used. Well, at least this makes sense. He's finally going to go where he needs to be. I won't be dumping him off on another person, and I'll be free of this burden as soon as he's there. My mind shifts to the next barrier to this problem that I am now facing as I remember the look of the empty bed as I left the room. Where could he be? I'm no longer gripped by the same level of fear that I initially was. The hope of potentially finally ending this gives my body back the confidence to march back into the room. I slowly open the door just enough for my head to slide in, giving me a view of the room in its entirety. And then I wait. I wait for that same stupid IV pole to do its hourly beep, as if it was aware of me watching. The machine beeps and flashes a light onto the bed. The silhouette of a body is there, still covered by a sheet. I immediately pull my head out and close the door. Maybe I was imagining him leaving. I began to doubt myself and scoff at the idea of a dead body actually moving. I return back to the nurse's station and gather the necessities for transferring a patient. As I walk by the medication room, I get an idea in my head. Just to make sure, I mutter to myself as I enter and pull out a combination of drugs known in the nursing world as a B52. A B52 is a combination of the drugs Benadryl, Halidol, and Ativan. When used in conjunction with another, it causes the recipient to enter what is commonly called night-night land amongst nurses. I grab almost 3 times the recommended dose. I'm not taking any chances with this. Worst case scenario? He's already dead and it does nothing anyway. Luckily, everyone is still busy helping in the other room to notice the amount that I had just taken out. I make my way back to the room and again open the door. I need to do this quick before my fear starts to take control of me. I briskly walk to the edge of the bed, paying significantly more attention to where my feet are this time, to avoid any loud noises. I hold my breath as I got close with the B-52 shot and, in one quick motion, jab the needle through the sheet into what I assume to be his thigh. I quickly inject the medicine and step back, fully expecting movement. The covered body remains motionless. You really were imagining things, I think to myself as I unlock the wheels of the bed and position it to be pulled out of the room. I still prefer to be at the front of the bed as I cannot bear the smell that comes from where his head is. I open the door and pull the bed out into the hallway. The employee elevators are located at the far back, so I quickly push the bed down the hallway to avoid any interaction with people. I finally reach the elevators and quickly hit the button to open the doors. I push the bed inside and step as far away as possible into the corner opposite his head. The B on the control panel lights up as I hit it and the doors close slowly. 4 more floors and I was free of this mess. As the doors close, I become fully aware of just how eerily creepy it is to be jammed in an elevator with a dead patient I've been seeing for 2 years. The elevator slowly moves downwards as I focus on keeping my cool and hope for the love of God that he doesn't wake up or move in some way. If he does, I'm almost certain that I might just instantly die of fright. An electronic voice blurts out from the speaker. Basement floor, reached. I wait for the doors to open. I wait, and I wait. But the metal doors in front of me refuse to slide open. I get an immediate feeling of terror as I notice the lighting above me start to dim and flicker. The lights quickly start to flick on and off at rapid intervals, then slowly alternating. On, off, on, off. I keep my eyes locked on the bed in front of me for any movement. On, off. The lights remain off this time for an extended amount of time. A growing putrid smell starts to fill the elevator as I cover my mouth to avoid both screaming and inhaling the noxious fumes. I stand motionless, staring at the bed in front of me. The white sheet remains as still as I am. It's too hard to really tell, but part of me feels like it isn't covering his head anymore. I can't shake the feeling that I'm now being watched. I close my eyes and hope to whatever higher power there is out there that this moment passes. Basement floor, reached. The electronic voice says once more. I open my eyes and immediately turn around. The doors slowly slide open, each second feeling like a millennia. As they open, the elevator lights quickly turn back on, illuminating a dimly lit hallway in front of me. This area in particular feels almost ancient, as if it hadn't been used in quite some time. But never mind that. I have a task that needs to be finished so I can finally be rid of myself of this problem. I look back to my patient to find the sheet still over his face. I must have been imagining things again. I grab the foot of the bed and quickly begin moving down the hallway. I pass what looks like a couple old storage rooms before I reach the end of the hallway. A large metal door with a massive side handle waits in front of me. Above it looks what appears to be the words, morgue. It's hard to tell as the red paint has slowly started to chip away to the point where there are only a few letters can be made out. Deep inside, I know this is the right place. It feels as if the room itself is calling to me, telling me this is where I need to be. I grab the handle and open the door, fully exposing the room. It's clear it hasn't been used in quite some time, but in front of me looks like what appears to be a giant oven. This room is so poorly lit that I need to bring out my flashlight on my phone to see anything. I leave the bed at the entrance to the room and walk over to what I assume to be the crematory. Attached to its door is an identity sheet from a patient chart. I already know what it says before I even read it. Room 407. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to be continuing with our series. I have the same patient every time I come to work, and he died 2 years ago. Part 3. Now, if you haven't checked out the last 2 parts, you might want to go ahead, hop off here, and jump back over and do that. I will give you a warning. Some of the stories that I read do have foul language within them. I try to work around that as best I can, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And as always, we will be publishing new parts every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. All right, let's dive right in. I'm almost certain that this is not part of my job description. I look at the crematory in front of me that now has room 407 taped to the side of it. As much as I don't want to, I have a feeling in my gut that if I don't do this, I'll never be free. I glance over my shoulder to make sure that the bed is in the doorway has stayed still. Luckily, it remains in the same position I left it in. My focus goes back to what's in front of me. How am I even supposed to go about this? Do I just toss him in there and turn on the machine? Something about this doesn't sit right with me. Even though I've been tortured for 2 whole years, I still feel like something is wrong about just throwing him in and leaving. The loud clank of the air conditioning turning on jolts me out of my sympathetic haze. I need to do this, not just for me, but perhaps maybe his soul will get some closure as well and finally move on. I open the door to the crematory and glance inside. There's a dusty old metal sheet that has been placed on rollers so it can slide out. I walk back to the bed in the doorway and bring it as close as I can to the metal sheet. My only real source of lighting is my phone, which I am forced to place nearby to help brighten the room. I begin sliding him, using the sheets underneath, into the crematory. With each slide, I hold my breath and pray he doesn't move or grab for me. The sound of his body dragging along the metal echoes throughout the room with every pull. It takes me a couple minutes to drag his corpse onto the metal sheet. Because of the darkness of the room, I fail to notice that the corner of his cover has become caught on an edge of the crematory. With the final pull, his body flies inside, his sheet all the while remaining stuck. His face now sits in the small window of lighting provided by my phone. I stare into his cold, milky blue eyes for what feels like an eternity. Then I'm drawn to his shriveled lips, covered in dried blood that had leaked from his nose. His mouth is in a perpetual scream, showing his rotting teeth and decaying tongue. It takes every bit of courage I have not to scream and run away instantly. I slam the door with him inside and turn the lock quickly. I take a deep breath and am flooded with memories now triggered by seeing his face for the first time in 2 years. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I can still feel what it felt like giving him compressions on his chest as he gasped for air, begging for me to not let him die. The warm feeling of his blood dripping on my gloves as I tried to stop the bleeding. I remember the voices of the doctors questioning me as to why he had gotten blood thinners when he was already at risk for massive bleeding. Deep down, inside, I know I am the reason why he died. My negligence led to his demise, and there was no other way to put it. But that was in the past, and now it would do me no good to dwell on previous mistakes. I get back control of my mind and remind myself of what I need to be doing. I look into the small window that is on the crematory for one last time. The hair on the back of my neck stands up as I realize there are a pair of eyes staring back at me through it. More specifically, those same cold, dead eyes I had just seen. I quickly stumble backwards as a giant thump erupts from the metal door. He's trying to get out. Another massive sound as he slams his head into the door. For the first time thus far, I'm finally forced to let out a scream. "Why won't you leave me alone?" I yell in a weird mixture of fear and frustration. Luckily, the door stays shut even though there is now continuous pounding. I don't have time to sit here and let him try to escape. I need to end this now. I scramble towards my phone and use it to light the control panel on the side of the crematory. Ignoring the sounds coming from inside, I manage to find the button. My now trembling hands reach for it and pause, just before pushing. "I'm sorry," I whisper as I press down, backing up slowly as the machine starts to whir to life. I stand still and watch as the machine starts to heat up to blistering degrees. The pounding inside reaches a fever pitch and then immediately stops. After 2 long, terrible years, it is finally over. A wave of relief washes over me as I feel tears of happiness well up in the corners of my eyes. I gather my thoughts and focus my breathing, trying to return back to my normal self before I return to the floor. I still have a couple hours left on my shift, maybe less depending on how long this adventure took. I close the door to the morgue and make my way back to the elevator, relishing in my newfound sense of happiness. As I press the button to open the doors, I hear a creak echo through the hallway, coming from where I had just left. I glance at my phone in my hand and pause. 4:07 a.m. I feel my heart immediately kick into overdrive as I am flooded with adrenaline. The elevator doors open and I rush in, rapidly turning around to see what that sound was. At the end of the hall, where I had just closed the door to the morgue, stands not one, but 2 shrouded figures, both covered in white sheets. They move slowly, dragging their feet with each step, as if moving through quicksand. I begin frantically pushing the button to close the doors faster, all to no avail. These hospital elevators have notoriously slow closing elevator doors, and sometimes can take ages to finally shut. I'm now stuck in a perplexing situation as I have nowhere to run, unless I want to run directly at them. They make a surprising amount of ground on me and are now no less than 15 feet away from the elevator. I hear the grind of the doors as they slowly start to close, but it's still not fast enough. I keep on pressing the button at a panicked speed and can now almost no longer see them through the crack of the doors. Right before the 2 doors connect, a pale hand shoots in between them, triggering the safety mechanism that opens the elevator. I back up into the far corner of the elevator as they now walk inside, the doors slowly sliding closed behind them. I'm now trapped. I slink to my knees and huddle in a huddled mess as they slowly continue moving toward me. Never in my life have I felt this amount of fear, hopelessness, and sadness bundled into one. I can feel my grip on reality and control of my mind start to slip as they approach with each step. The one that had managed to open the elevator door before it closed now remained still, with the other approaching at the same speed. It somehow felt different, less familiar. Nevertheless, it still maintained the same grip of pure fear and terror that I was accustomed to knowing. Now standing directly in front of me, it reached down and toward my face, causing me to flinch and close my eyes. I feel the iciness of skin as the fingers begin to caress my face. I'm so stricken with fear that all I can do is maintain my same position and hold in my whimpers of fear. 4th floor reached, an electronic voice says, breaking the feeling that was previously on my face. My eyes snap open to see the elevator doors opening with nothing else in sight. I scramble to my feet and place my hand to my face, immediately feeling that it was noticeably colder where I had just been touched. I hurriedly make my way back to the nursing station and gather my things. I spot my charge nurse and tell her that I need to go home immediately, as it's an emergency. She looks at me, somewhat amused and somewhat surprised, and says, "Well, that's fine, but it's nearly 7 a.m. anyway. If you had an emergency, you could have left sooner." Normally, I would have questioned her or been shocked to hear that almost 3 hours had passed without me knowing it. But at this point in time, I just needed to leave and get out of that place. I'm now at my wit's end and genuinely concerned if I stay here any further that I will legitimately be in danger. I take the stairs on the way out because at this very moment, the thought of taking an elevator just might cause my heart to stop. I'm relieved as I finally am able to make it outside and take a deep breath of fresh air. I make it to my car and sit inside, completely exhausted from whatever the hell just happened to me for the last couple hours. As I drive away, I look in the rearview window of my car and notice that people are beginning to wake up and turn their lights on. By now, I know exactly where that haunted room is, even looking in a mirror. For the first time in 2 years, it remains dark. I take a deep breath and allow myself to calmly exhale. Maybe, just maybe, I'm finally free of this. And that is all for our story time tonight. As always, thank you all again for tuning in. And once again, as always, we will be publishing new parts every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. So keep an eye out for those. And as always, sweet dreams.